There are a bunch of videos out there talking about how you can use the languages you speak in order to make money online, like generate 9, 10, 11 income streams with the languages you speak. However, I think that this can mislead some people into learning languages in order to make some money, or at least to justify learning languages because at some point they're gonna be able to generate a lot of money with it. Yet I believe that there are thousands of better ways to generate money than learning languages and then try to use one of those methods in order to monetize the language. So in this video, I'd like to talk about this relationship between making money and learning languages. And more specifically, I'd like to dissuade you from learning languages because you think that you're gonna make more money. Okay, so to give you a little bit of context, I'd like to explain you that I'm actually making this video for my younger self. So back then, like 10 years ago, when I started getting into language learning and I started noticing that I was good at it, I had also read somewhere that for every additional language that you learned, you would be able to increase your income by, I don't remember if it was like 3%, 2%, 4%, something like that. And that would compound over the years, and thus over a long time frame, you would be able to make a lot of money if you just started adding languages to your portfolio. So these studies and these numbers come from the fact that speaking another language gives you access to other jobs, or even to jobs where you actually need to know multiple languages. And on top of that, some of the languages bear a premium, like you're gonna get a higher salary, for instance, if you speak German or Japanese, like languages which are in high demand in certain regions or in certain industries. So I remember that back then when I read these statistics, I started to get even more motivated in order to learn the languages. I mean, I wasn't doing it fully for the money, like that was not the only reason. I obviously enjoyed learning languages, but the fact that I thought that I could make more money in the future was kind of a big motivator as well. Like probably if I hadn't heard of these numbers, I probably wouldn't have put that much energy into learning languages. But the fact that I knew that at some point I would be able to monetize that and make a lot of money out of it, like that was a big motivator, definitely. But here's where my main point of today's video comes, which is that if your goal is to make money, if that motivates you a lot, then you shouldn't be learning languages, because with all of the time that you need in order to become good at that language, you could be investing that into another skill which is way more valuable nowadays, which would earn you a lot of money. So what I didn't understand back then was the huge amount of hours you need in order to become very good at a language. Because it's important to understand here that in order to get some of those jobs that are going to be able to give you this salary increase, you actually have to speak that language really well. Because you're probably going to be competing against people who might be natives in that language, right? And you'll have to use that language on a day-to-day basis to communicate with natives. And sometimes you'll have to talk about and discuss sensitive issues or complex issues, like depending on the job, right? But the thing is, in order to do that, you actually have to have a very high level in that language. And in order to achieve that, I mean, it obviously depends on what your mother tongue is and what your target language is. But we all know that it might take easily more than 1,000 hours to learn a new language, right? Or to bring it to that level of proficiency, probably even more. And the thing is, those 1,000 hours, those 1,500 hours is a lot of time. It's time you could have invested in learning skills that are way more useful to you if your goal is to make money. So if you have this desire for making a lot of money, it would probably make sense to, I don't know, invest all of those hours in business courses, or maybe you're interested in coding, so you might want to start learning code. And the thing is, if you use those 1,000 hours learning Java instead, or learning Python, like the amount of money you could be making after that is, I don't know how many times superior to the amount of money you could be making if you learned German, let's say. And I think this idea applies regardless of what type of job you want to do with that language you learn. Like if you want to become a teacher in that language, you have to be very good at it, right? Same if you want to become a tour guide in that language. And the same applies if you want to become a translator or if you want to work in, let's say, import-export department of whatever international company, right? So in all of these cases, you need a very high level in your target language, which requires you to invest a lot of hours into it, which are hours you could have invested doing something else, something that gives you a way higher return on investment. Okay, so that was probably my main argument for today, but another very important point to consider is that nowadays in 2024, with the emergence of ChatGPT and with the boom of artificial intelligence that we're seeing, learning languages, speaking another language, adds less and less value. So ChatGPT 4.0 was released a few days ago, and there you could see how good automatic translation has become.
He wonders if whales could talk, what would they tell us?
They might ask, how do we solve linear equations?
Potrebbero chiederci come risolviamo le equazioni lineari.
So the thing is, in a few years, sooner than we think, most companies are going to have the necessary technology that will allow us to have video calls, live video calls with people who don't speak our language. Yet we're going to be able to have an automatic translation of what they're saying, maybe just in text, or maybe even a direct translation of their voices. And thus, the communication barrier that language presented is getting more and more diluted because of the tech advancement, the tech progress we have seen and we are experiencing right now. Because think of it for a second, very soon you're going to be able to have a call with South Korea, for example, and you won't have the need of any translator because everything is going to be translated automatically. So people who invested 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 hours learning Korean and getting super good at it, now they are not going to be able to contribute much. Like they are not going to be able to add much value. Like, of course, if the Koreans happen to come here, then it would be cooler if this guy who speaks Korean very well just shows them around and speaks Korean to them. They're going to feel more welcome. Like, I'm not saying that the skill is like completely useless or completely lost, but I think we can all agree that to a very large extent, the skill he has is not that useful anymore. It's not that valuable. And thus, my whole point is that he's going to be able to make less money. Like this language premium that might have existed, that exists nowadays actually, is going to be less and less relevant up to the point of becoming maybe inexistent. So this actually makes the first point I made even stronger. So what I was saying was, don't invest a lot of hours into learning languages because by the end of the day, you'll earn very little compared to what you could have learned if you had invested these hours doing something else. But now the thing is, it's going to be like, even if you invest all of this amount of hours learning a language, the return that you will get, it's almost going to be inexistent, right? And this leads me to the third point I wanted to make today, which is that in 99% of the cases, employers don't give a shit about how many languages you speak. In most cases, they just want you to speak two languages. A, English, and B, the language of that country. That's it. So this is not to say that in some specific cases, they might want someone who speaks an additional third language, right? This might happen every now and then, and this might be more common in certain industries and certain jobs than in others. But what I'm saying is that in the vast majority of the cases, speaking another language is not going to add anything whatsoever to your job. Because if they don't need you to speak that language in the job, then you're just going to be using the two languages that they want you to speak. And you just need to speak those two languages, and that's it. And I'm also saying this in order to bust a misconception I see some people have about what it means to speak a lot of languages when you apply for jobs, because now I'm applying for jobs and some of my colleagues, when they see my CV, they are like, oh, it's impressive because you speak a lot of languages, so it might be easy for you to like get past the screening. And I say, no, actually, it doesn't make a difference. People don't give a shit if I speak a lot of languages. Like the employer, the interviewer doesn't even ask like why I speak tons of languages, because they don't care, because they only want me to speak two. So they don't even pay attention to that. Like maybe they see it, they might be impressed. Like every now and then, obviously, I get the comment or the question of, oh, this is very impressive. You speak loads of languages. That's so cool. How did you do it? And then I reply, and they might think like, oh my God, this guy is so brilliant. This guy is so smart. So maybe, yeah, in those rare instances, I might be able to give the impression that I'm super smart or something because I speak a lot of languages, which, by the way, is not that correlated in my opinion. But leaving these cases aside, speaking loads of languages and putting that on my CV doesn't help me in any way, as far as I can see, in helping a job. Like the things that will actually help me find a job is to be good at the skills they require and to be able to prove that during the interviews. That's it. So to tie this back to the previous points I've made, it's not only true that you might invest a lot of hours into learning a new language in order to earn just a little bit more every year. It's not only true that nowadays, because of the technological changes that we're seeing, speaking another language adds very little or no value. But on top of that, like in 99% of the cases, employers don't care because in your day-to-day job, you'll just be using true languages, right? So now just to summarize and clarify today's message, if you derive loads of pleasure from learning languages and if you really enjoy it, then keep doing it and keep getting better at the languages you're currently learning. But if part of the reason as to why you're learning languages is because you want to make more money in the future, if that's actually an important goal, then you might probably have to rethink how you want to get there. Because there are way better ways of making money, which will require you less amount of time and will like give you a higher return, right? So yeah, that was the whole message I wanted to convey today. I hope you found it interesting and that I made you rethink a little bit like why you're learning languages and what to do with your time. All right, thanks and see you next time.